Hello, everybody. I'm just about ready to get started. Thanks again, Chaos Mania, for the good wishes, and welcome, Chris. Hello, Murphy. Let's chat a little bit. So we're gonna start today's session off with I guess, final thought for Radiant Historia. That isn't to say I won't consider doing the New Game Plus or other things like that, but I feel like that won't really change my opinion towards the game, and I'd rather talk about it while it's still semi-fresh in my head. So if I had to give a very short summary of how I feel about the game, it's still one of my favorite games. In particular for the 3DS, it's probably up there, top 2, top 3. In terms of the content specific to the game, I have really mixed feelings about it. One thing I don't have mixed feelings about, though, is the composer. The soundtrack is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Sounds like an exaggeration, but honestly, almost every song on the soundtrack I really like. I'm really struggling to think of games where every song to me is a hit, where I would listen to it outside of the game itself. Like, shy of something of like a Streets of Rage, I'm really struggling to contend with the sheer number of songs on the soundtrack, and all of them are also of high quality. So I'm happy they got the original composer to come back for the 3DS content. But let's talk about the core game before we talk about, I would say, my complaints towards the game itself. So they redid the art style, they redid some of the game balancing, they gave characters voice lines, but the main plot itself is not really all too different. So us going around in basically 2 parallel timelines for the most part, trying to resolve issues in one area caused by our nemesis, the Black Chronicle wielder, and using it to affect the other timeline, I think is a really cool concept, and I think for the most part they do it pretty well. I'm not sure how intentionally funny they meant for some of the bad endings of the game to be, but I know that was one of my favorite parts of the game, going through the story, purposely making the bad decision to doom the town and or society and or kill off some party members. In particular, I think Dark Marco was probably one of the chat's favorites, but there were some pretty funny ones. Getting sassed by the little boy who's one of the guardians of the Chronicle, aka the thing that's letting us go through time, is pretty funny. Again, I'm not sure how intentionally funny it was meant to be, but I found it pretty funny. Welcome, Calvisham. So while you're zipping back and forth, trying to slowly prevent the world from turning into a giant desert in the core game, you are introduced to a cast of characters, and I think for the most part, they're all very memorable. They're all mostly likable. It does help that there's voice acting in this version of the game. I will say that is a plus as you go through the main story, so it's a little easier to get it behind the character personalities. And I think for the most part, the voice acting was also very good. I think with only 1 or 2 very minor exceptions, weirdly one of them being the voice actress for Magilu, who played the Queen. I feel like her sound lines were not balanced correctly, but I felt like all the other ones were fine. I know chat has their favorite NPC character, Fennel. I'm sure if nothing else, chat will remember that character for many, many years to come. So the cast is very memorable, whether it's a hero or an antagonist or just a generic NPC. And I really, there's the Fennel comment. So I really like the game as the whole. I liked the setting. I liked the slow unveiling of learning about your protagonist, learning who gives you the powers gradually, although I have to say the voice lines do spoil that very heavily compared to the original version. They didn't do a good enough of a filter for the main villain, who I will not name in the final thoughts for people that were curious, but yeah, they did not filter that voice properly. You can tell. There's only one character it could realistically be, given you've heard them before. So that was a bit unfortunate in the main plot. But I like the variety of locations, and I like the fact that there's a decent amount of what I'll call fast travel. You can zip to different points in the plot, identified on a timeline as major nodes. So you could choose to go back to shops, for example, in earlier chapters of the story, if you want to, or go back for side quests. I like the idea of you know, they in the future they have this need and we could go back in the past to solve it, or some things we do in the past will end up affecting things in another timeline, for example. I like that dynamic, and I think that portion of the game worked extremely well. We'll talk a little bit about the combat, because it is a RPG game, and it is a grid-based game, sort of. Your party members are all in a traditional line. You have 3 party members at any given time. You can have support characters that sometimes interact, I think based off a luck score, to extend combos. But the enemies themselves are on a giant grid of 3x3, and the game is all about positioning, maneuvering, and manipulating turn order. So very early on, you're given the ability to push enemy units together, so that way if you do a single strike, it hits 2 people instead of just 1. You can reposition them to hold all over the place by the end of the game. And there are certain attacks that are only effective in certain squares on the grid. Then they introduce mechanics like launching an enemy in the air to increase the damage of the next melee follow-up. They introduce things like you build up a super meter, where you could break the enemy's turns, which you can always see in the bottom screen of the 3DS, in order to basically stack your turns in a row for massive damage. So the more attacks you have in a row, the more damage you do, since it multiplies damage based off of the number of hits that you're dealing. So there's a decent amount of strategy in it, and I think at all points in time, I think it mostly works. We played through the game on a very low encounter kind of playthrough, with 2 exception points through our playthrough. And I feel like for the most part, if you knew what you were doing, you could do it. There's only a couple times where the game got a little stat checky, and to avoid some of the RNG of some of the later game bosses, it made sense to just spend like another 10-15 minutes just leveling. But for a majority of the game, we're able to skip encounters entirely. There's no random encounters, there's no forced encounters outside of story encounters as you travel through different areas. So we basically just ignored combat until we found a spot that gave like really high XP relative to where we were in the story. And then we basically just did plot to plot to plot. So I was allowed to play the game the way that I wanted to, pretty much from start to finish. There are some pretty big character imbalances going through the game. I'm sure Chad is already thinking of a couple of names in particular where the characters were just so oppressively strong that it did kind of invalidate using other party members. So it gives you 2 support characters, Marco and Rainy, in the beginning, and they're okay. A lot of people do like Rainy because she's like your equivalency of the Black Mage. She can hit the different elements. And then almost like a quarter of the way into the game, maybe a little before then, honestly, depending on how you play. Yeah, you get one of the most broken characters in the game, Ott. She's a little girl, she's a shaman. I don't know why her damage is that high. Keep in mind, Chad, I want you to remember, they rebalanced a lot of things, they buffed some of the other characters, and they nerfed this little girl, and this little girl is still the most broken character in the game. I don't know what they were thinking. Like, honestly, she gets like early elemental access compared to the Black Mage of the party, which also doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, this is her nerfed, by the way, chat. I just want you to... I brought that up once in the playthrough, but yeah, that was her nerfed. But she just is a character that just has too many things. What was she like before? The best character in the game. Some things never change, Chris. Some things never change. So, like, she is a character that can provide multiple hits in a combo, has one of the stronger healing magics, can make you immune to status ailments, which is extremely relevant for pretty much the last quarter of the game. Her traps are the most damaging thing in the game, period. There's pretty much nothing that could compete with it, shy of you power grinding out one of the other characters, where she could just go in, no combat experience whatsoever, and just completely take over the fights. Anytime an enemy has any semblance of low magic defense, they are basically dead to her in like 2 moves. And I think it's both a boon and a detriment at the same time. Like, it rewards you for knowing you can stack traps on an enemy as long as it's not on the space they previously occupied. But I think they overcompensated the damage still, like, way too much for the downside of not being able to start a trap in the same spot an enemy is standing in. So they tried to balance it in that sense, but she's clearly one of the best characters. And she basically comboed with everybody, and we did use her for a lot of the playthrough. Now, to give some respect and some shout-outs, they did make Rosh a bit better. He's one of the early characters you also technically get at the beginning of the game, but a big issue with him is that he's unavailable for a majority of the story. So when you potentially get him at later points of the story, he's just really far behind, and unless you use some of the bonus content stuff specific to the 3DS, he just ends up like really, really underleveled. So I think people were kind of sleeping on him. We actually used him to beat the Uber boss of this game, so he is good, but you have to prep with him. So I like that even what would be considered some of the lower tier characters were mostly useful. Like, we ended up using, I'm just gonna call it out, we ended up using Marco a lot more in this playthrough for a low level playthrough, whereas normally if I was fighting every enemy that I saw as I went along, I would probably never select Marco because I should just be overly tanky. Whereas he had some benefits of being able to eventually give up his turn and provided some gimmicky healing and was generally tanky. We never used him for damage, though. He's terrible at damage. Yeah, poor Marco, indeed. So, you know, I feel like it was fine going through the story. There's certain chapters where, depending on the plot events, you either have access to some characters or don't have access to characters. And I think them giving us access to Ott almost the whole game was a big mistake, because she, as I said before, I think she is still the best character in the game, at least in terms of damage. So there's kind of no reason to play certain characters beyond like chapter 2 out of like chapter 7, which is kind of sad to say, but it is honestly really true. Then again, given certain story developments, poor Marco rescinded, yeah. So I think, yeah, Unstoppable. I think from the standpoint of combos, I think it's scaled up pretty well with the exception of Ott, because she's just, what a broken character. I'll try not to name too many other characters since I think that would go too much into spoiler territory, but I will state for the other melee enthusiasts, there are really good melee pairings, including with Rosh. And in fact, we ended the game with that, of just dunking on the bosses with one of my favorite moves. But I think overall, the balance it's closer, but it's still not quite right. I still had a good time with it. I think our big trouble points playing through like a low experience playthrough was mostly just the beginning of the game before you unlock the full mechanics, and also have limited access to more broken characters in the party. Once you get to like chapter 1, chapter 2, it's like, oh, this game is free. You're fine. I will say, for people that have a problem with spiders, I don't think this will be your game. And I won't go into more details. But yes, arachnophobia people out there, this is not a game for you. You get to the midpoint of the game. Oh boy, chat with some of those enemies. So again, I like the general plot. You're trying to save the world, so there are basically side quests that don't really contribute to anything in particular other than items and monetary rewards, which are for the most part good. There's only like a handful of quests where I would say they're not worth it. Otherwise, if you're just playing through skipping shops like we were, you basically got all the upgrades you needed while going for 100% of the story. And there's an okay amount of treasure chests littered throughout the dungeons, which isn't too bad. I think the game made a big mistake giving us an ability to skip all encounters by paying MP. I felt like that was a mistake on the developer's part. I'm surprised they didn't remove it in the 3DS version. So we literally got into 0 encounters, unless we wanted to, after a certain point in the story. And it's fairly early on, too. It's not like we got it at the end of the game. Like, before the halfway point, we were already 100% skipping encounters. So, I don't know. I guess they decided to leave that as is. So I liked some of the, you know, B-plot villains. The main villain was okay. I mean, it, it just, he didn't have like the greatest motivation of all time. I don't know if he himself is specifically going to be very memorable, but I feel like the people that were around him were a lot more interesting, like Noah, or not Noah. Let me think about this. Oh no, I forgot his name, chat. He always talks about the prophet Noah, but his name is not Noah. Fennel in particular. I did like Diaz a little bit, and I liked the other knight in the employ of the crazy Queen Felina. And in general, I think they helped move the game along because you got to see them interacting with each other throughout. Yeah, I was gonna say, not Noah. The other person says Noah like every other line. I can't unassociate that with the character name. Hugo, I think his name is Hugo. And I think they drive the plot forward. I like to see, you know, the interactions, a little bit of politicking. It's a more mature story, but I feel for the most part, it was well done. Now, where I feel the game kind of gets the F grade is the actual 3DS content. So the main game, I love. In fact, you could even choose at the beginning of the game to play with only the original game content and play it as is with the damage changes. However, I'm gonna denote that there is extra content, and we played with the extra content in our playthrough. And while I did appreciate additional kind of bonus dungeon, the Vault of Time, which lets you level characters in one consistent area, it makes it easier to swap party members in and out, which was really great for streaming to be able to do so. With the downside of having a very annoying currency that goes away whenever you leave. A really terrible gimmick, by the way. The other content is just not good. Like, I think chat would fully agree. Like, Nemesia, which is the character that is a majority of the bonus content for the 3DS, is not really all that interesting or compelling. She is basically like a very generic side quest giver, and the writing goes to like pure fanfic levels of just complete nonsense. Some of them are amusing and like intentionally amusing, and others are we just kind of laughed at because they were so terrible. It was very much all over the place. Like, I'm sure chat appreciated seeing more Fennel. In particular, the self-destruct sequence with Fennel was kind of funny. But just overall, they really undid, like, I'm trying not to go into spoilers too much, but they really undid the tone of the main game with the new 3DS good ending. Because normally you could play through, and if you complete certain key quests, it will alter the future slightly in the normal gameplay, and you get to see a better ending. It's kind of ends on more of a somber tone, because in the normal game, certain characters don't come back. I'll leave it at that. But from the 3DS version, basically everybody had a happy ending, and that was just kind of not fitting for the game at all. Like, literally not at all. Like, I'm pretty sure I booed, and I had the chat boo several points of just the complete nonsense where it's like, oh, and then this person gets this, and then that person gets this, and look, they're all saved, happy, like, hallelujah. Throw your hands in the air. But yeah, she was not a good addition to the game. I feel like, honestly, if it wasn't for the bonus dungeons, I probably would recommend not playing on that at all. It actually detracts from the game and stalls the game pretty significantly. Except for Mimble. We'll not explain that further in the final thoughts, but yes, no Mimble. Yeah, it just, I don't know. I feel like the tone of it was very off. You could kind of tell without me even needing to say it. Had I not even separated the 3DS content from the original DS content, I'm sure chat would have picked up on like how hokey and cheesy the writing felt in the bonus quests in particular. It just didn't work. I just gotta be honest. So I think the sad part too is that, like, you would think, like, if they're gonna add content to extend the game, that it will at least be hard. And then, like, the ending of the game was easier. than every other point leading up to it. And of course, it has like the same issues of, oh, we just crammed in a new dungeon, so here's all these overpowered items, here you go. So, just throw your hands in the air, chat. Like, that dungeon was completely superfluous. That true final dungeon of the 3DS version. The original 3DS one, where we're kind of going into a temple kind of area, that one was fun. I had a lot of fun with that. I liked the boss rush for the most part into the final boss, but man, that actual final dungeon was just boring. Just boring, chat. Yeah, it was just very optimistic and everything kind of turns out, where the other one had a very different ending, as the chat has seen, where certain characters do not come back in particular. But I think from the standpoint of overall experience with the game, as I said before, amazing music. The songs in the 3DS content are good. In fact, we're hearing some of the battle music right now, which is pretty excellent. Another thing that you know what, now that I think about it, I actually don't like the new art style in particular. It feels a little nitpicky. Like, I like the updated in-game graphics of the characters. I feel like it was more vibrant, it popped more, it was generally cleaner. I did not like the new portraits of the characters. They went more of a more generic anime style, which I don't really think fit the game. While we were playing through the game itself, I had the old art up for some of the characters along the bottom. And just honestly, I just felt it fit the characters a bit better. Like, the only character that I would argue might be better might be Rosh specifically, but I feel like everybody else was just kind of eh. Kafka was, I guess, arguably better, but in particular, Erica, Ott, and Protagonist, I did not like the looks of those characters compared to their original versions. But anyway, yes, you can't have it all when it comes down to that. So if I really had to choose just playing through the original version, yeah, versus the new one, I'd still think I'd prefer the new one for some of the quality of life changes to it. But it's a very begrudging pick, I will state. It does come with a couple of flaws, like we stated at the beginning of our playthrough. There's an experience glitch where if you fast skip through the XP collection, you won't actually get the bonus XP. So I made sure to basically never skip it. What did old Marco look like? I don't think I'm ready to answer chat's questions like that. I would have to look it up. I don't remember, to be honest with you, chat. I'm also going to be honest with you, I almost never used Marco in any of my playthroughs. This on-stream playthrough was the most I had ever used Marco. He went to, like, instant backseat. You have no idea. As soon as I got literally anybody, I never put him on the team again. Yeah, it's like, I mean, I could try to pop it up on stream, but it's still a goofy hat. I still can't tell if he's meant to be a kid or a dwarf. I honestly can't tell, chat. I'm gonna be real with you. Even having played through the game at least 3 times at this point, I still can't answer that question. What is his age? How old is he supposed to be? Is he supposed to look like a small kid at all times in an oversized outfit? I don't know. That was just the aesthetic they went for, I guess. But yeah, it just... I feel like the game is definitely worth playing. I feel like, as I said before, the main playthrough itself was good. I just don't think the bonus content is worth it. So for people that are really looking for completion's sake, just don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. It's not worth it. I think it actually just makes the story worse. And to me, it kind of left like a sour taste in the mouth after a pretty fun, like 30-40 hour main playthrough, including all side quests. So, kind of disappointing to go through there. Also, I have to say, I'm not happy to see one of the fan service cutscenes in the main game. That was not in the original, so thanks, Atlas. I didn't really want that. But, yeah, gee, thanks. That's what that somber moment needed, where they were talking about giving up war. Just pandering to that kind of audience. So that itself was pretty disappointing. And that ended up in the main game. We also did not touch the DLC for a very specific reason, and it is very fan servicey. So we are not touching that with anything. I'm not paying the money to go see that. No, thank you. So sorry, people that want to see the DLC. Never will I ever play it. Uh-oh. Murphy tried posting a link, he got deleted. Rip Murphy. Oh yeah, links are banned because of all the bots. Someone link allow you. I don't know. I don't even remember, to be honest, Murphy. I very rarely do it. I mean, if this isn't it, then I don't know what the command is. It's not one I normally do. Okay. There you go, Murphy. Oh, you're just linking to the wiki? Oh. Yeah, that's fine. I don't need a link to the wiki. I thought you were trying to share something more specific. Yeah, I'm not. No. Oh, yeah, it's for chat. I was gonna say definitely not for me. I'm not scrolling through that. I will state though that for people that are looking to kind of play through the game, I know I say this in a lot of videos, and it's still true even in the final thoughts for this game. Man, the guides are so bad. Can we talk about this, chat? Like, this is another game where the suggestions are just terrible. Like, just actually terrible. Like, I don't understand, chat, how they get away with this. They can't keep getting away with this, chat. Oh man, chat, I don't know. I just feel like objectively, whenever you see a guide not talk about using OT traps, wrong. just actually wrong, period. If they aren't talking about like divine protection, OT, or potentially the superpower house, wrong. they're making it take so many more turns, it's almost not even funny. So yeah. When I look at guides and they're saying like buy like all these 20 armors, buy these 20 weapons, buy all these items, and I'm like, they didn't recommend like a might herb or a magic herb? Okay. It's literally so much better than the other equipment, it's not even funny. And plus you normally just get equipment playing through the game, as chat has seen. I think there were like 3 points in the whole playthrough I bought a weapon. And one of them was from the bonus dungeon, which I don't even know if that should count because it was a different currency. Like, it was there explicitly to be abused. So I don't know, throw your hands in the air. The normal shops, I almost never bought weapons. I think I got like a Gafka Fist and 1 item for OT, I think. So, I don't know. Well, hopefully people saw part of my playthrough and will understand how to better deal with the combat in the game, or watch a speedrun. Either or, if they want to learn how to play through the game. I do not recommend reading those guides. They are just horribly outdated. And for some of them, I really question like what level they did some of this content where they're just like, oh yeah, tank is OT. I'm like, you got to a point where OT was tanky? What are you doing over there? How many battles did you play to get before this boss? I mean, chat saw, like, that was like one of her only downsides, is she did not have like 9k HP. So I'm like, I don't know. Just absolute madness, chat. So I'm calling out all the people writing guides. But not calling out the speedrunners. They know what they're doing, for sure. They go a little above and beyond. They do some risky picks, which I don't know if I'd recommend in a casual setting. But yeah. Just very interesting choices throughout. I feel like this is one of the few RPGs where I did use items fairly often. Like, you'll see me play maybe potentially some older RPGs and basically just never touch the item menu ever while I play. And in this game, like, we were using buffs fairly actively. I used single target heals, multi-target heals, revives, status cures. Like, I ended up using a lot of items throughout the playthrough, including some stat downs, which were amazing. Or in some rare scenarios, I used the status effect once. So I do feel like the game made me think a lot more, so I felt challenged in a good way, that I felt like for the most part it was doable as is, going story point to story point and doing the side quests. I felt I got a little over leveled in preparation for some of the purely optional things that are not even needed for the good ending. Like, I'm sure chat will know what I'm gonna say, but man, oh man, I really hate the changes to the bonus boss in this game. They made the bonus boss so much harder and so much worse than the original game. I kid you not, like, it was almost unplayable. So I'd just like to apologize for people that sat through that absolute garbage fight with the master. What BS of RNG, chat. That is one of the worst fights I have experienced. Like, it was not an easy fight necessarily in the original version either, but it is so much worse in this version. It's like unreal how much tankier the character is and how often the character spams offensive techniques. So, like, well, you could go through the game, and if you are struggling, you can observe some patterns that are potentially abusable from the enemies. Man, oh man. That bonus boss was not fun. Like, you know it's bad when the Uber boss is easier than the bonus boss. Like, the new game content specifically puts an enemy in there with all these restrictions, and it was still easier than the bonus boss of what they did after this game is completely nonsense. Like, just remember that, chat. That, like, we beat the Uber boss in one try. That other boss took like 4+ tries and levels because it was such a stat check. It was unreal. Holy, that fight is unfair, chat. I never want to play through the game again to fight that. So I guess if I did play through again on like a New Game Plus equivalency, I will never do that boss again. I don't even care that I leveled. I still don't want to do that boss again. Like, I know you can keep experience, and I'm like, nope, it is still a garbage fight. I'm not doing it. Your stats almost don't even matter. It's just raw HP and not even, well, I guess speed to some extent, but yeah, getting like double, triple turn no matter what was pretty garbage. So shout outs to having really fun combat except for the bonus boss, which was way, way, way overtuned in this game. If you could beat the bonus boss, everything afterwards is a complete joke, including the Uber boss. Honestly, the Uber boss required almost nothing in addition after we beat the bonus boss. We did like one side quest, one additional boss clear, and beat Uber boss. Like, that's almost like no prep, comparatively. That's like almost nothing. That's like, whatever. Guess I'll... Just trying to think if I have any other final thoughts other than saying that this is one of my new favorite songs. The true final boss theme playing right now. Yeah, I guess I don't have too much more to add. I mean, I guess I'll give chat like another minute or so if they want to write their comments on how they felt about the game or if they feel like anything was missed. But overall, a very solid experience. Still one of my favorite RPGs. Not a fan of the 3DS changes for the most part. I think the only thing that I kind of liked about it is whenever you did one of their side quests, it full healed you. So, other than that, I'm kind of struggling to say positive things about the bonus content. It is literally just there for padding. There's like a loose 30-minute story sprawled out between potentially hours of side quests that have nothing really to do with anything. And yeah, just see how it goes, I suppose, in the future, whether I want to revisit the game on a New Game Plus or just play through again, but skip that awful bonus boss. Chat saying, Fennel is the best character. Game was very interesting with time travel gimmick. The endings were amusing. Nemesia ruined everything. Yeah, Nemesia, I was kind of hoping would just turn out to be a villain so we could kill her. I was not a fan of her teacher gimmick. I just found her more annoying than anything else. Oh, I did forget something, and it's playing, and I'm gonna purposely skip this particular song. I really did not like the anime intro of this particular game. I don't feel like it fits at all. We'll skip to, like, literally anything else. Hoping for Nemesis, so sad it didn't happen, yeah. Again, I feel like they were trying to pander to a slightly different audience than the core game when they re-released it on the 3DS, and that anime intro was just so conflicting with the rest of the game. Very, very disappointing. I don't know what they were thinking, honestly. think other than that, I will state that I do like that the game allows you to approach combat in different ways. Yeah, they definitely anime-fied everything with the remake, in particular with the looks, but also the intro. The intro is just like so unnecessary. Like I actually felt annoyed listening to it because I'm like, you know what the tone of the game is, right? That things are generally bleak, and it's an against all odds kind of story. And there's like a lot of minor character death throughout, and it's like ba 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 ba, and I'm like, oh, just close. Not appropriate or thematic. It's closing. Ridiculous. But yeah. Other than that, I have to say, like, as I said before, the core story itself is pretty good. I think most of the side quests were really good. I will give one special shout out, so it's very minor spoiler for the for the 3DS bonus content with Marco producing quite a fantastic scene of just making Marco one of the most hopeless and pathetic characters. I don't think that was intentional, but it was very funny. We'll just state that. Seeing him just get slugged out and we basically have to help him cheat to win, but we can't assist him directly or else it'll hurt his feelings, is like one of the funniest things ever. I'm just letting you know, chat. It is very unintentionally funny. I'm still laughing thinking about it. Yeah, he had many moments of failure, I agree. But yeah, just sorry, Marco, you were not a character for me. I know actually, that is one last thing I want to say. I know there's the whole time traveling gimmick and you could go to different points in the story, and I love that you could skip through the cutscenes after you've seen them. In the original game, you could always skip through. People might have mixed feelings whether or not you should be able to skip them the first time through. One thing I did not like about the game, genuinely, and it did actually annoy me at several points, it's not specific to the 3DS version. When you travel back and forth in time, it keeps resetting your party. I'm like, Radiant Historia, I don't want to play with Rainy and Marco. I really, really don't want to play with these two characters. Could you not swap out Ott and my powerhouses, please? Could you stop? You like did it occasionally in the bonus dungeon correctly, but it's like every other time I'm like, but I went to like the same point in time where those characters were available. Why even touch my party? Like, stop it. That is like one of my big pet peeves in video games. When they touch things and make me have to go back to the way that I want to play the game, it does annoy me. And I'm gonna let you know, if you do the side quests, you have to hop back and forth a lot. So you just have to kind of either give up hope on your main party or just be prepared for the game to be like, you will love Rainy and Marco, exactly. Because it kept putting him in the party, and I'm like, no, I've been kind of done with you since like chapter 2, maybe arguably chapter 1. I stopped using you altogether. So, like, could you move along? I don't want to see you anymore. I'm not interested. Yeah, there were some moments that were, but again, a lot of that has to do with the 3DS version. Like the going back to chapter 1 and the prologue stuff. That was almost all explicitly because of the 3DS version. We asked Fennel, I think, one thing in the actual main story of the game, whereas it like gives reasons to go back to characters that are not as relevant into the story to give them more of a conclusion, is I guess the best way to put it. All the conclusions were terrible. It technically concluded them, so you know what happened to them, whereas it was more ambiguous in the original game. But not worth it. And again, it's very goofy seeing you go back and forth and talk to like the same person in like game hours, like an hour, but in their perspective in seconds. We're just asking them like, oh, is that a Thaumatek arm? Oh, do you know how this box works? Oh, have you worked on this machine before? Oh, have you thought about using this? Just like every 4 seconds, like some random complaint or something. Just so nonsense. Chat's loving the Don Hack song, apparently. But anyway, chat, I think that's about all we have to say about Radiant Historia for now. To be seen if we end up trying some of the other stuff in it. We did not learn about fringing in this particular game, sorry to say, Chris. But we did learn that Little Girl is the most powerful character, never doubt her power. I love it when the game also was like, we can't bring you along, like, you might get in danger. And I'm like, you're gonna be in danger if you don't bring her along. Have you seen her DPS? Are you stupid? She's the strongest healer in the party, too. Stupid. I wanted to slap the protagonist a couple times. I'm like, no, we just can't keep the OP character in our team for some reason, I guess. Oh man, they should not have made her that strong. They should not have made her that strong. But anyway, chat, I think that is our end to the ramblings for our final thoughts. So I think with that, chat, we're going to say goodbye to YouTube. We're not going to talk about what Odd does any further, but I will say thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again in the next game.